These weren't just movies. They were cinematic grenades tossed into the laps of unsuspecting audiences. Back in the 1960s, filmmakers with tiny budgets and wild imaginations made films so outrageous that police stormed theaters. Reels were seized mid-showing, and politicians swore they'd never allow such garbage in their towns again. But the harder they tried to bury them, the more people wanted to see them. Which of these infamous reels still has the power to make you squirm? Stick around. Some of these are legendary for all the wrong reasons. Blood Feast, 1963. It's hard to overstate how much this one changed the game. Before Blood Feast, gore was a seasoning. A bit of red here, a scary stab there. Then Herschel Gordon Lewis came along and made it the main course. The plot? A Miami caterer who moonlights as a cultist, murders women, and collects their body parts to resurrect an ancient goddess. Sounds campy, right? Well, audiences in 1963 weren't laughing. Lewis shot the whole thing on a shoestring, using corn syrup and red dye for blood, raw meat from the butcher for props, and actors who looked like they were reading their lines off cue cards. But that didn't matter. This wasn't about polish. This was about pushing boundaries until they snapped. Some screenings even had nurses on standby, just in case anyone fainted. Police raided theaters, especially in smaller towns. In the UK, it was outright banned for decades. Critics called it the worst film ever made. And Lewis wore that like a medal. He plastered quotes from angry reviewers on posters, turning outrage into marketing gold. And it worked. Blood Feast made over $4 million in Grindhouse theaters, a staggering return for a movie shot for less than the price of a new car. Today, it's laughably dated. The gore looks like a haunted house prank. But that's missing the point. Blood Feast wasn't about realism. It was about breaking the last cinematic taboo and showing audiences something they'd never forget, even if they wanted to. Lewis didn't just make a movie. He opened a floodgate. Love Camp 7, 1969. Some films are controversial because they stumble into touchy territory. Love Camp 7 dove in headfirst and set up camp. Directed by Lee Frost, this low-budget shocker is widely considered the foundation of what would later be called the Nazi exploitation subgenre. The premise? 2 American women infiltrate a German prison camp during the war to extract vital intelligence. That's the official plot anyway. What audiences got was something far more lurid and confrontational. Frost filmed it with a gritty, almost documentary-style realism, using bare sets and washed-out lighting. It gave the whole thing a feeling of claustrophobic authenticity, like you were trapped in the same grim barracks as the characters. The movie had almost no release in mainstream theaters. Instead, it thrived in the shadowy corners of the Grindhouse. Circuit. Censors across the globe lost their minds. The UK refused to classify it for decades. Canada and Australia slammed the door on it entirely. Even in the United States, it never received a formal rating, circulating in underground screenings and late-night adult houses. Feminist activists protested its content, staging demonstrations that occasionally ended in arrests. One protest in Chicago saw red paint hurled at a screen mid-showing. The irony? That controversy is exactly what made the film immortal in exploitation circles. Love Camp 7 influenced an entire wave of films in the 1970s, from Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, to dozens of cheap knockoffs. Director Lee Frost, unapologetic to the end, once said he had no regrets about making it. The more people told him it was too much, the more audiences lined up to see what the fuss was about. It's still one of those titles that comes with a whispered warning, and that's exactly why it remains unforgettable. The Touch of Her Flesh, 1967. Sometimes exploitation cinema doesn't bother with subtlety. It kicks the door down and throws subtlety out the window. The Touch of Her Flesh is one of those films. Directed by Michael Findlay under the alias Julian Marsh, it's the first part of his infamous Flesh trilogy, and it wastes no time diving into pure grindhouse mayhem. The setup is as blunt as it gets. A weapons dealer comes home, finds his wife with another man, storms out in rage, and gets hit by a car. He wakes up in the hospital blind in one eye, mentally unhinged, and filled with hatred toward women. From there, it's a one-way ticket to a spree of bizarre and elaborate killings. Knives, blow darts, poisoned roses. The creativity here is as twisted as the premise. Shot for next to nothing, the movie wears its budget limitations like a badge. The grainy black and white footage, awkward cuts, and echoey sound only add to its unpolished charm. Roberta Findlay, Michael's wife and frequent collaborator, plays the kind of icy female lead that became her signature in underground cinema. The censors didn't just frown at the touch of her flesh, they came down on it hard. It was outright banned in Boston and Detroit. Canadian customs agents seized prints at the border, calling it psychologically dangerous. A theater owner in New Jersey was arrested for screening it and kept showing it anyway, just to spite the authorities. Despite, or maybe because of, its notoriety, the film pulled in enough cash to greenlight two sequels, The Curse of Her Flesh and The Kiss of Her Flesh. Together, they became a kind of underground badge of honor for collectors. Findlay himself summed it up years later with a grin. "We made filth because filth paid the rent." Olga's House of Shame, 1964. If you walked into a theater in 1964 expecting a tame crime drama and this came on screen, you'd either walk out or be glued to your seat in disbelief. Olga's House of Shame, directed by Joseph Mora, wasn't just another low-budget crime flick, it was the birth of an entire exploitation subgenre. Audrey Campbell plays Olga, a ruthless crime boss running a white slavery ring out of an abandoned building. She's stylish, calculating, and utterly merciless toward anyone who crosses her. The film's visual grit comes from its guerrilla-style shooting on New York's Lower East Side, often without permits. Most of the cast were burlesque dancers and nightclub performers paid in cash and told to improvise their lines. The movie looked like nothing audiences had seen before. It had the raw, documentary feel of newsreel footage mixed with the pulpy, over-the-top menace of comic book villains. That combination rattled censors across America. Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles all banned it outright. The UK never even classified it, and British censors still consider it unacceptable to this day. The controversy only fueled ticket sales. In New York's Times Square Grindhouse circuit, it ran for an unbelievable 40 straight weeks, raking in over $2 million on a budget of less than $20,000. It proved you didn't need studio backing or polished production to make a fortune, just a premise that would get people talking. And talk they did. Feminist groups condemned it. Church leaders called it depravity on film. Collectors now prize surviving prints, not just because of its shock value, but because it's a time capsule of New York's underground in the early 60s. Without Olga's House of Shame, the flood of imitators that dominated the rest of the decade might never have happened. The Naked Kiss, 1964. Samuel Fuller didn't make movies for polite company. His films were blunt, fast-moving, and unafraid to scrape at the ugliest parts of human nature. The Naked Kiss might be his most shocking work of the 60s, and that's saying something. It opens with a scene that instantly made censors nervous. A woman attacking a man in a fit of rage, her wig flying off to reveal she's bald. From there, the film follows Kelly, a former prostitute, as she tries to rebuild her life in a small town. She starts working with disabled children, meets the town's most respected man, and believes she's found redemption, until she discovers his dark secret. Fuller shot it like a film noir, but filled it with raw, unpredictable energy. Constance Towers delivers a powerhouse performance as Kelly, a woman who refuses to be broken no matter what's thrown at her. The dialogue is razor-sharp, the pacing relentless. But in 1964, audiences weren't ready for a heroine with such a complicated past, let alone the film's disturbing revelations. The Catholic Legion of Decency immediately condemned it. Several countries banned it outright. Theater owners in conservative towns were warned they could lose their licenses if they showed it. In the UK, it stayed banned until 1990. Fuller shrugged off the backlash, later earning praise from directors like Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino, who called him the original punk filmmaker. Over time, The Naked Kiss has been reclaimed as a daring classic, a film that weaponized melodrama to expose hypocrisy and cruelty. But in its day, it was dynamite in a film can, and Fuller seemed to enjoy lighting the fuse. Vixen, 1968. Russ Meyer didn't just push buttons, he pounded on them until the whole control panel shorted out. Vixen was the first exploitation film with an X rating to cross into mainstream success, and it did it by mixing outrageous character behavior with sharp satire. The setup centers on Vixen Palmer, played by Erica Gavin, a free-spirited Canadian woman whose personal code of conduct is, let's just say, non-traditional. She charms, manipulates, and plays people against each other with a smile that hides sharp edges. Her targets include her husband's fishing buddies, a visiting couple, and even her own family. But here's the trick. Meyer wasn't just making a cheap thrill ride. He was weaving in commentary about race, politics, and social hypocrisy, hiding the critique under layers of jaw-dropping scenes. Audiences in 1968 had never seen anything like it, and many cities reacted with full-on panic. Boston, Miami, and Dallas all banned it. A theater owner in Georgia was arrested for screening it. In Washington, a Senate obscenity investigation in 1969 singled it out by name as an example of cinema gone too far. Meyer, of course, loved every second of the controversy. The backlash didn't hurt ticket sales, it boosted them. Vixen raked in over $8 million at the box office, running for almost a year straight in Los Angeles. Meyer used the profits to gain independence from Hollywood studios, famously saying the film made him rich enough to tell every executive in town to go jump in a lake. Today, it's still a fascinating mix of low-budget cheekiness and razor-sharp observation. Meyer proved you could poke fun at societal norms, make a fortune, and terrify censors all at once. Vixen wasn't just an exploitation film, it was a grenade disguised as a comedy. The Notorious Daughter of Fanny Hill, 1966. Imagine buying a ticket expecting a classy period drama, and then realizing you've walked into one of the cheekiest exploitation films of the decade. That's exactly what happened with The Notorious Daughter of Fanny Hill. Directed by Peter Perry Jr., it claimed to be inspired by the famous 18th century novel Fanny Hill, but the filmmakers didn't even pretend to stick to the source material. The story follows the supposed daughter of Fanny Hill as she arrives in Victorian London and promptly gets caught up in the city's underground world of vice. The film is filled with corsets, carriages, and lavish set pieces, all serving as a backdrop for scenes that shocked mid-60s audiences. Theater posters played up the historical angle, luring in unsuspecting patrons who thought they were getting a refined costume drama. Then the police showed up. In Chicago, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles, authorities raided theaters mid-screening, confiscated reels, and charged owners with obscenity. In the UK, the British Board of Film Censors refused to even consider it. Ironically, the more they cracked down, the more the film became a hot item on the underground circuit. Box Office International handled distribution and leaned hard into the bait-and-switch marketing. By the time word spread about what it really was, The Notorious Daughter of Fanny Hill had cemented itself as a cult favorite. Collectors still prize original posters for their audacious mix of old-world elegance and sly misdirection. Looking back, it's a perfect example of how 60s exploitation thrived on misleading appearances. You came for the costumes. You stayed because you couldn't believe this was playing in public. The Sexloiters, 1965. Some exploitation films announce their intentions right in the title. The Sexloiters, directed by Anton Holden, starts like a detective thriller and then gleefully veers off the rails into pure Grindhouse territory. The plot follows a private investigator tracking a killer targeting women in New York City. At first, it plays like a straightforward murder mystery, dimly lit streets, shadowy suspects, and tense interrogations. But in true exploitation fashion, the mystery takes frequent detours into cabaret performances, elaborate dances, and surreal club sequences that have almost nothing to do with the investigation. Holden shot much of the film in real NYC night spots, giving it an authentic, lived-in feel. The performers weren't Hollywood actors, many were actual club entertainers, which added a raw, unpolished energy to the scenes. Surprisingly, the acting is better than you'd expect for a film of its type, with some sharp exchanges of dialogue that feel almost improvised. Censorship boards, however, were not impressed. Ohio, Illinois, and Utah all refused to grant it approval, citing gratuitous scenes of cruelty toward women. Even the poster was banned in certain cities for being too suggestive. Despite the restrictions, it still managed to pull in around $600,000, all cash, from Grindhouse and 42nd Street screenings. Holden never made another film like it, moving into sound editing instead. But The Sexloiters remains a snapshot of mid-60s exploitation at its most chaotic. Part crime drama, part variety show, and entirely designed to provoke. Scum of the Earth, 1963. Before Herschel Gordon Lewis became the godfather of gore, he dipped into another corner of exploitation cinema, the grimy roughie. Scum of the Earth is a mean little film about coercion, greed, and the ugly underbelly of photography. The plot follows a naive young woman who's lured into modeling, only to find herself trapped by a gang of sleazy operators who threaten to ruin her unless she keeps working for them. It's all shot in stark black and white, giving it a documentary-like harshness that makes the story feel uncomfortably real. Lewis and producer David Friedman weren't aiming for fun here. This was designed to unsettle. The characters are cold and calculating, the dialogue dripping with manipulation. There are no heroes in Scum of the Earth, just predators and victims locked in a grim struggle. When it premiered, some viewers assumed it was based on real cases, and the moral outrage came fast. Censors in several states pushed for edits, but Lewis refused. He marketed it as the film that could only be shown to adults, turning moral panic into box office gold. It didn't make the same splash as Blood Feast, but it carved out a niche following among Grindhouse audiences who wanted something darker. Today, it's remembered as one of the most cynical films of the 60s, and a chilling reminder that exploitation wasn't always colorful and campy. Sometimes it hit uncomfortably close to reality. She Freak, 1967. Carnivals were supposed to be fun. She Freak turned them into a nightmare. Directed by Byron Mabe, this low-budget remake of Todd Browning's 1932 Freaks transported the story into the lurid world of traveling sideshows in the swinging 60s. The plot follows a waitress who joins a carnival to escape her dull life, only to betray her new friends and get a dose of poetic justice. Along the way, the film takes full advantage of its real carnival setting. Sideshow banners, midway games, and genuine circus performers all add to the atmosphere. What makes She Freak stand out is its mix of exploitation gimmicks with genuine location shooting. The filmmakers shot at actual carnivals in the South, often without permission, giving the film a gritty authenticity. The transformation scene near the end, a nod to Browning's original, was pure shock value in 1967 and still packs a punch for first-time viewers. Censors didn't like the film's mean-spirited edge and unsettling imagery. In some towns, police seized prints during their first weekend, but Grindhouse theaters loved it. The combination of freak show spectacle and revenge plot made it an easy sell to curious audiences. Today, She Freak is a time capsule of mid-century carnival life and a masterclass in stretching a tiny budget into something unforgettable. It's not just an exploitation film, it's a roadside attraction you can't look away from. The immoral Mr. T's, 1960. Before Russ Meyer made Vixen, he practically invented a new kind of exploitation with The Immoral Mr. T's. Shot for a fraction of what Hollywood comedies cost, it followed a simple premise. A timid salesman with a vivid imagination begins noticing beauty everywhere he goes. It was lighthearted, colorful, and, for 1960, incredibly daring in how openly it played with suggestion. Meyer treated it like a cartoon come to life, using exaggerated expressions, bright visuals, and whimsical narration to keep things breezy. But make no mistake, this was a calculated push against the boundaries of what American audiences could see on a theater screen. When it debuted, The Immoral Mr. T's bypassed the usual censorship boards by playing in independent theaters. Word of mouth spread quickly, and before long, it was a surprise hit. Cities like Seattle and Pittsburgh tried to ban it, but the legal challenges only made it more popular. Meyer claimed it made over $1 million in its first year. Not bad for a film shot in under a week. More importantly, it paved the way for a wave of similar lighthearted exploitation films in the early 60s. Meyer proved you didn't need studio backing or big stars, just a clever hook and the nerve to challenge what audiences expected. A Smell of Honey, A Swallow of Brine, 1966. Byron Mabe's A Smell of Honey, A Swallow of Brine might sound like a poetic drama, but make no mistake. It's one of the nastiest little exploitation films of the decade. The story centers on Sharon Winters, a manipulative young woman who uses charm to toy with men, leading them into compromising situations and then destroying them. She treats relationships like a sport, with no concern for the wreckage she leaves behind. Mabe directs with a mix of cheap sets and clever camera work, squeezing every ounce of tension from the script. The black and white cinematography gives it a noir-like feel, but the pacing is pure Grindhouse, quick, punchy, and never letting the audience get too comfortable. When it hit theaters, critics were appalled by its cynicism. It was banned outright in some towns, while others demanded heavy edits. Mabe didn't care. He'd made the film for a very specific audience, and they turned out in droves. Over time, it's become a cult classic among exploitation collectors for its unapologetic nastiness. There's no redemption here, no lesson learned. Just a cold, mean little movie that still manages to sting decades later. These 12 films weren't just made to entertain. They were made to provoke, to challenge, and sometimes to outright scandalize. They thrived in an era when censorship boards still thought they could control what people saw, only to find that controversy was the best advertisement of all. Which of these would you dare to watch today? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you enjoy exploring cinema's wild side, and subscribe for more journeys into the films polite society tried and failed to erase.